Ride your horse forward and set it straight. Testing. I hope you guys can hear me pretty well. Okay, we are going to examine. Let me see if I can. How do I zoom in on this thing? I want us to see. No, that's not what I want to do. Okay, this is a little better. So now, last week, we talked about, or I talked about, and hopefully you guys listened, explaining, going through how Steinbrecht explained this to us. This isn't his quote, this isn't his way, this is the way, but his is the best explanation that I'm aware of. So he explained to us, first of all, that what he means and what this statement means by forward is namely the desire to move the load forward. So that is the two things that is that the horse has a desire, his own desire, to advance the load, to move the load. So from this, we can infer that the horse has a desire to carry. So it's the horse's own desire for self-carriage. He is carrying himself. And if that includes the rider, he is carrying the load forward. Okay, now, so that summarizes last week. And I want to go back and just draw attention to the language that he uses, that the rider takes care to maintain. We take care to maintain. We're not hag ridden. The horses aren't hag ridden from us, like being all over their shit and like, we take care to maintain. If the horse feels uncertain, do I do it? Do I have to carry here too? Yes, you have to carry here too. We're there to be emphatic. But the main thing is that we are attentive to take care to maintain. If we overload the horse, we're going to suppress the thrust. That was us not taking care. If he doesn't understand, we didn't explain it well enough. We didn't explain to him that this is in all circumstances, in all conditions. We didn't take care. So the rider takes care. Now that's going to bring us to this sentence, which is all I'm going to pay attention to today. The horse must therefore be enabled through practice to restrain its thrust to the utmost by increasing the load. These are my parentheses, but thrust should never be completely suppressed by overdoing it. The horse must be enabled. That means we help him do it. Now, this doesn't mean we do it for him. We enable the horse to start to govern his own thrust, that is, to restrain it properly by increasing his load. So we enable the horse by himself to govern the thrust with his own carrying power, to restrain thrust by increasing the load, to govern the thrust by increasing the load. How do we enable him? Through practice. Now, the reason why this is so in my mind is that in training with you guys this last week or two, I've felt the urge to say, we hit the difficulty. We have to practice. There's almost an idea in the horse world right now that if you get the right formula, you won't have to practice. That's not the case. We have to practice. We can be clumsy. We can be awkward. So can our horse. We have to learn the riding and be confident enough in these two golden rules that we're going to ride our horses forward. We're going to enable them through practice. And then we're going to also set them straight so they can manage their loads that they're advancing even better. But this is through practice. My aim is to get riders through practice competent that they can explain all of this to their horses. The horses must be enabled through practice. We enable the horses. We take care that we maintain and enable them through practice. That means repetition. That means daily. That means continual practice. We enable them and help them and explain to them through practice to govern their own thrust by carrying. But thrust cannot be governed if it does not exist. That's another way that Steinbrecht said the same thing. So the horse has the thrust. We're nurturing the thrust. He explodes forward. No, he just then blew through his own ability to restrain his own thrust, to govern his own thrust by carrying. This is why, this is a little bit hard to say, we must teach carrying first. The horse already has thrust. Motion is the element of the horse, and all motion starts in the hindquarters. He's got thrust. We can see it on the lunge line. We can see him when he's loose. He's a youngster. We see him motoring around his pasture. He has thrust. He can also carry it because he can stop and turn. How are we going to teach him that the way he stops and turns himself when he's playing with his friends in the field is the same way it is in the riding? He restrains his own thrust by increasing the load, by loading the uppermost joints of the hindquarters with more weight. He can restrain, govern, or adjust the thrust. He can change the trajectory of it. He can change the direction of it. And he can change the force of it, because when the force goes through a more acutely angled hindquarter joint, it increases the thrust. Okay, so increased load can increase the force of the thrust. Okay, I hope I'm not getting off the track here too much and you guys are following along. All of this relationship of the propulsive force and the carrying power that's bound with elasticity, the precise ratios of how the horse uses his own carrying power to govern the thrust. That's what the aim of horse training is. And how do we enable him to do this, to know it and to calibrate it to our own weight aids, the weight of our seat? Through practice. Okay. I never really know if I'm cogent when I get technical here, but this paragraph and this sentence, it is loaded. It tells us, we really get all of the instruction here, don't we? Just as we have all the instruction in the aim. Okay. So the horse is enabled through practice to learn to govern his thrust by carrying. And the more agile he gets in this, the more perfect and precise are the ratios of the effects of these forces. Okay, then I put paragraphs or put parentheses around this, but thrust should never be completely suppressed by overdoing it. You know, grammatically, I guess it's right that it's just, he keeps saying, but thrust should never, but it does deserve its own separate attention. There are so many classical influencers, and I think there always have been, but their presence is amplified by the force of the internet. There are so many classical influencers who are overdoing the load upon the thrust. These are the people that are always showing us their stupid levades and their piafs that the horses can't trot under, that the hindquarters are too far underneath the horse instead of underneath the load. The hindquarters are supposed to go underneath the load, not some little random mark that someone made optically. The hindquarters go under the load. Why? Because the hindquarters are trained to carry the load. Okay. But thrust should never be completely suppressed by overdoing it. There is a woman who is very popular on Instagram, and I think I've only known about her since autumn, but every single video is this big bay, sweet, accommodating horse. She has that horse sitting down and just like jumping around. And I don't know if it's supposed to be a pirouette or a 10 or a 6 meter square in canter, whatever. If the horse does it, you don't need to stay in it. There's no medal or reward for how near the ground you can get your horse's hocks, especially if you can't go forward out of it. Because if you can't go forward out of it easily, the thrust has been completely suppressed by overdoing it. So that can be our way of checking ourselves. That this is why trainers like the major and the best trainers in the world, we have high quality short distances, very good quality, go forward. Not trying to hold a position or a load forever and ever. I think this is right. The longest distance that shoulder in is shown in competition. I think this is right. And I will let myself be stand corrected. But I think the longest line that shoulder in is shown in competition in the FEI is 16 meters in the intermediate on the center line. That is not a very long distance. You don't need to do it for a 60-meter long side. If the horse can get in and out of the shoulder in well, that means he is governing the load very well, and he's not suppressing his thrust by overdoing it. And on that note, I think I'll stop. But I just want to add this one thing. After every proof of engagement, we always ride forward out of it. We always want to refresh. It's like you always want to stir up and refresh the thrust and make sure it's still there and that it's bright. That's why I always say that after every curve line, which is where we introduce one-sided engagement in the first place, we always must ride out forward uphill keen. And our friend Amanda with the horse Truman likes to say forward uphill connected keen, so she can giggle at the acronym. I think that's good. Ride your horse forward and set it straight.